All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Built-in Test Prep with Study Island. We're very excited to have everyone joining us today. My name is Haley Peterson, and I'm one of the marketing associates here at Inventum in Minneapolis. Before we get started with the presentation, I want to point out a few things on the attendee interface. So right now, we're looking at an example of the GoToWebinar control panel. This should be at the right-hand side of your screen. This control panel will help you participate in today's webinar. So let's take a look. So by clicking the orange arrow, you can open and close your control panel. The audio pane provides all of your audio information. By default, you've joined the webinar with your microphone and speakers. However, a microphone is not needed because you'll be muted throughout the presentation. If you're having any trouble with your speakers, you can also join by telephone. If you select the radio button, we've provided a toll-free number and an access code. You will not need an audio pin since you'll be muted, so don't worry about that. You also have the ability to send us questions through the questions pane. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and send out a test chat to everyone. If you could just please send me a test chat back and let me know that your audio is working. So you should see that pop up right now. As I wait for responses, I want to go ahead and tell you a little bit more about Edmentum, our commitment as an organization, and our approach to assessment, instruction, and data, which lay the foundation for how we define and support personalized learning. Edmentum has grown as a technology and has developed over time. We're at the forefront of technology in the 1960s with Plato courseware and the early 2000s with Study Island. With nearly 60 years of experience, we hold true to our commitments as a company, and we're committed to making it easier for educators to individualize learning for every student. We do this in 3 ways: digital curriculum, assessments, and managed services and consulting. So I see that people are writing in now, which is great. Thank you, everybody. Please continue chatting throughout the presentation, as we'll be stopping to answer any related questions throughout the webinar. Now, before I jump behind the scenes, I want to introduce today's presenter, Regina Waddell. Regina has worked for Edmentum for the past 8 years, starting out on the implementation team, working directly with educators to help them implement their programs effectively, and now serves as one of the leaders on the marketing team. Before coming to Edmentum, Regina was a classroom teacher in Dallas Independent School District for 5 years, where she taught 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade math. Oh, I'm sorry, not math, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. Regina earned her Bachelor of Arts in Austin College and her Master's in Educational Leadership and Policy at the University of Texas at Arlington. Now, before I pass it over to Regina, I want to remind everyone of a couple of things. So I know that I said please send your questions throughout the webinar, but we will reserve time at the end of today's session for Q&A. During that Q&A, I'll upload a certificate of attendance that can be used towards CEU, so stick around. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you by the end of the day. So perfect, that's all of the housekeeping things from me. Regina, if you're ready, we can get started.
Yeah, I'm ready. So I'm going to share my screen in just a second.
Awesome.
All right, so Haley, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. So hello, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join this webinar. Like Haley said, my name is Regina Waddell, and I'm a member of our marketing team and have worked with Edmentum for several years. And before that, was an elementary school teacher. So as we dive into Study Island, I want to make sure that we are all on the same page about what we're going to be going over today. So we're going to start with just a little bit of a Study Island overview and learn a little bit more about the program and the efficacy behind it. Then we'll dive into the meat of our session and talk about those best practices for building test preparation into your instruction. And as a part of that, we'll be looking live at the program at some of the features we'll be discussing. And then, like Haley mentioned, at the end, we'll have some time for questions and answers. But also remember, as you have questions, type those in, and we will pause periodically to answer them through the session too. So no need to wait until the end to ask your questions. We're just going to make sure that we also have time at the end for those. So before we keep going, I want to learn a little bit more about you guys. So first off, I'd love to know, what is your role at your school or district? I'm going to launch a poll in just a second. And once you see that on your screen, please select the response that best describes you. Okay, I'm going to wait a couple more seconds to give everyone a chance to vote. All right, 3, 2, last chance. All right, let me close this poll. And I'm going to share the results just so you guys can see as well. And so 35% of you are teachers, great. And then we also have some school administrators, curriculum administrators, 21% other. Sorry, you guys, Go to only let me have 5 answer choices, so I couldn't put any more. But thank you all for sharing that. I think that we're going to go over some information that's going to be really helpful. Of course, if you're a classroom teacher, if you're a school administrator, you're going to learn more about ways that educators on your campus can use this program for test preparation. Same with curriculum instruction. So lots of tips here for different roles, and you'll kind of be able to see how you can apply it or how you can share that information with others if you're coaching them using the program or kind of monitoring that. So let me hide that poll. And I have another one. I'd love to learn what best describes your experience level with Study Island. So as soon as you see it on your screen, feel free to select your response. All right, I'm going to wait a couple more seconds to give everyone a chance to vote. All right, let me close that. All right, so it looks like everyone who voted does have Study Island. About 18% of you haven't used it yet. And then about half of you use it regularly and are familiar with a lot of the features. Great. So I think we'll have some information here for everyone. So those of you that use it regularly, hopefully we'll show you some ways that you may or may not be using the program. So you'll get some insights into different implementation activities. And those of you who have only used it a few times or haven't used it yet, you'll get to touch a lot of features that you likely haven't discovered. All right. So just for that brief level set overview, so Study Island, K-12 practice, test preparation, and formative assessment. It does all of those things. So, and it helps teachers, schools, and districts improve student achievement in 4 key ways. First off, it helps educators save time. Teachers spend countless hours writing test questions, grading those assessments, creating and curating practice activities. And with Study Island, they don't have to do all of that. That time can be spent doing other things or just going home a little bit earlier at the end of the day. So when you can use Study Island for some of that work that you may have had to do yourself, then that's going to save you some time. Another way that it helps teachers and educators and administrators is that it helps to make instruction more effective. That ongoing formative assessment, the type in which educators receive a discernible response from every single student and students get immediate feedback, is the most effective type for student learning. And with Study Island, teachers can incorporate that type of formative assessment throughout instruction. And because responses are system graded, students get feedback right away too. And then teachers have the data they need to make instructional decisions. Study Island helps to improve student achievement on state assessments. So we can probably agree that no one really likes state tests, but right now they are something that pretty much all of us, all public school teachers and students really have to deal with. And because Study Island is based on your state standards and the questions are built to be similar to those that students see on state assessments, every time students work in Study Island, that's helping them prepare for that state test. And then lastly, Study Island helps to improve mastery and retention for both the short and the long term. Research shows that one of the most effective study strategies is retrieval practice, which is when students answer questions on a particular topic. So they answer practice questions. And it turns out that when the brain searches memory for the answer to a question, that actually strengthens those neural pathways to the memory, which helps students remember and understand things better. So every time students work in Study Island, they're engaging in that type of retrieval practice that boosts mastery. So you don't have to feel guilty about having your students answer practice questions because that actually helps them learn and retain the information better. And then just a little bit more about Study Island. The bread and butter of the program are the standards-based items that are built by our team of in-house curriculum experts. If you haven't used the program yet, you may not know there are more than 65,000 technology-enhanced items, 13 unique item types. So Study Island is not just multiple choice questions and answers. We have 13 different item types to be similar to those that are used on state assessments. And they also, of course, help students demonstrate their understanding in different ways so that we can assess at different depth of knowledge levels. So as far as the efficacy of Study Island, just so that you know, we have lots of research backing up the effectiveness on this program. And one of the most recent ones was one that Century Analytics conducted. And they used the NWEA MAP assessment, a diverse sample of national students who took the fall NWEA MAP assessment. And then some of those students used Study Island, some of them did not. So they looked at the students' fall scores and they looked at students who had similar fall assessment scores. And then they looked at the students who used Study Island and the students that didn't. They looked at their spring scores, at their winter scores. And the students who used Study Island showed statistically significantly higher scores on that winter assessment than those who didn't. Now, that's just one of the research studies. We've done them on the Pennsylvania state test, on the Arizona state test. We've used other assessments. We've had one validated by Marzano Research. It's just something that we do to make sure that this program is doing what we say that it does. And it also helps us to identify opportunities to make it better. So I'm going to move through this one. So now we're just going to jump into the meat. All right. So as you're getting ready for state assessments, and looking to build test preparation in, because that's what we're focusing on this session. There are, of course, lots of ways you can use Study Island, but test prep season, it's all about making sure that students can show what they know on that state test. And in this particular session, we're going to talk about ways that you can build that into what you're already doing so that you don't have to have, this like turn over your classroom to test prep. I know when I was teaching, there were times when you just had to do that because that test is so important. But hopefully you'll be able to grab some ideas and strategies here that are going to help you to more integrate test preparation and still be able to teach the way that you like to teach. So the first step there is determining your priorities. There likely is not going to be enough time between now and the test for you to cover a year's worth of content. So a good place to start is by identifying which standards are assessed most prominently on the state test. Now, in most states, there are a few key standards that are going to show up quite a bit, and then some others that may only show up in a question or two. So of course, you want to focus your efforts on those standards that are going to show up the most. If there are going to be 10 questions on main idea, then it's really important to make sure that your students understand and can identify the main idea. And to find that information, generally on the state DOE websites, you can utilize those state assessment blueprints and also the release tests to see what the question makeup is and what it likely will be. So another piece of information that you're going to need to determine your priorities and where you're going to focus your efforts is knowledge of what standards your students have mastered and not mastered. Sounds simple enough, right? There are lots of places you can get this data. Of course, if your district or school has given a recent benchmark that covers all the standards, awesome, because that's going to give you the data that you need, especially if it's been given in the last month or so. If you don't have that, I would start with your students, take a look at their last year state assessment data, because even though it's been a year since that shows kind of how they performed in that state assessment environment. And you can see similarities, not just for individual students, but you can look for similarities and trends, because that's going to help you identify maybe if there were any instructional gaps that where maybe most of the students did poorly on comparing fractions. So you know that might be a topic that's going to need some extra attention. And this is something you may have done at the beginning of the school year, but it's good to review that. So take a look at their last year test scores. You also want to take a look at the last year test scores for you. So if you teach fourth grade, review how your fourth grade students last year performed on the assessment and look for trends there. There might be some instructional blind spots that you may have forgotten about. Like maybe there's a topic that you didn't spend enough time on and your students didn't do as well on. Well, now you know for this year, that's probably something that's going to need a little more attention. So that's going to kind of help you too to know how students might perform. Also, because you're looking at the assessment that your students are going to be taking, then it's going to help you to understand what types of questions and topics that students are likely going to struggle on. And then, of course, another place to get data is if your students have been working in Study Island in the fall, then you have lots of data within the program on how they've been performing. So utilize that data as well to help you identify it. And if you feel like you need like some fresh data and you want to give your students an assessment to see where they are at this point in time, then if your account has Study Island benchmarks, then of course, do a benchmark, have your students take it because it covers, those are built aligned to the SEED assessment. So that's going to give you a really nice view of what your students know and they don't. Or if you don't have benchmarks, then you can utilize our test builder feature, and I'll show you that a little later, and build kind of a little mini benchmark assessment and have your students take that. Either way, they're getting practice in a formalized testing experience, and you're going to get some nice data to see what they're going to need. All right, so once you've kind of taken a look and you've figured out the topics or standards that you probably should be focusing your attention on, the next thing you're going to need to do is just take a look at what instructional strategies you're using right now in your classroom. Now, I made a short list of different types of activities that happen in a classroom. Most likely you're using most or all of these, even if you don't call them the exact same thing. And we're going to talk about kind of some different features of Study Island and how you can utilize that feature to kind of plug in for these different activities. Because since your Study Island questions, one, are built directly from your standards, they're aligned to the questions on the SEED assessment, then if you can plug in opportunities for your students to work on Study Island and be strategic about the standards and the topics that you review, then you can make test preparation just a part of your standard instruction by integrating more of that in there. And so, of course, you're not going to use Study Island for a bell ringer and exit ticket and homework all in the same day. So we're just going to look at the different ways and how you can do it, and you'll be able to identify, okay, this makes sense for me to use it for a bell ringer here, and then they get this homework here, and I add in, you know, these two standards I know they need practice on. And so you can kind of build out your test preparation program by looking at those different pieces. So my goal is to give you enough information that you can look at what you're doing and make some decisions that are going to allow your students to get the test preparation they need. So the first feature we're going to spend some time looking at are group sessions. Now, group sessions, these are a favorite feature of Study Island because you can conduct a live classroom response session in which the educator launches the session and the students respond on their devices, tablets, Chromebooks, phones, or any other internet connected device. They're great for getting in the moment responses, and students love the game-based modes that came out about a year ago. So we're going to take a look at these live in the program and then just discuss some ways that you can implement them. Before I go on though, Haley, do we have any questions that have come in?
Um, I have one about if you have limited access to Study Island and how you can obtain the growth that's possible, but I think we're going to get to that as we get into the sessions.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to pause my screen for just a sec and get the program pulled up here. Okay, so I've just logged into Study Island. I'm on the teacher page. I'm actually logged in as, I'm gonna see if I can zoom in a little bit. I'm actually logged in as an administrator, but the admin has access also to all of the teacher stuff. So on my teacher page, I can see information just about how my students have been working in the program, if they've earned blue ribbons, the amount of time they've been spending. Um, and then I can also access assignments, create classes. So this is kind of the teacher, one of the teacher hubs in Study Island. So for a group session, I'm just going to come here and create a group session. So I want you guys to see how easy this is. I just select the class. I just select one and I can assign it to others. I'll show you that. And then I choose the type of group session. So there are 3 different types of group sessions in Study Island. First, there's a checkpoint session. This one is not competitive. The teacher launches the session. They launch one question at a time, and then they give students the opportunity to respond. The teacher can see who gets it right, who gets it wrong. These are really great for using like in the middle of instruction. So maybe you have, you know, 5 minutes of instruction and you want to launch a question and see who's getting it, who isn't. This is a great replacement for, I know when I was a teacher, I would ask a question, my students would raise their hand. I'd pick a student, they'd answer, and then, whether they got it right or wrong, we discuss it and move on. Well, this allows you, instead of having just that one response and moving the class along, you actually get a discernible response from every single student. So you really get a pulse of what your class knows. But these also work great as bell ringers, exit tickets, however you want to use them, but they're that live session, teacher-led. Next, we have challenge mode. So challenge mode is a lot like the checkpoint, except it has a gamification element. If you've ever used Kahoot, then challenge mode works a lot like that, except of course you have your study island items already built in. And so you launch the challenge mode, then it's teacher led. So you go question by question, but the students are trying to answer as quickly as possible and also correctly. They earn points, and then at the end, they're winners. So it's really fun. The students get really excited with that one. And then lastly, we have race mode. Race mode is also a gamified version. And the way race mode works is it's actually student led. So the teacher launches the session, but once the session is launched, the students work through answering questions as quickly as possible, but also correctly, because they only get points if they're correct. And then once they get to the end, they can see, the session results and see how they're performing. And, that's how they earn their score. So that one's great to use also as like a bell ringer and a warm up, or anytime you want to like let the students go and get to work and then have about 10 minutes to, take attendance or walk around the room because the students are working on it kind of at their own pace. So for today, the one I want to show you is a challenge mode, but I recommend kind of getting in and trying them all out. We've seen a lot of responses on social media from educators talking about the group sessions, and I see challenge and race come up quite a bit. Maybe race a little more, I think because it has that student-led element, but it really just depends on how you're using it. So just to show you how this works, I'm going to go through this really quickly. I'm going to create an assignment. We're just going to call it challenge test. Um, and then I can select content from my practice topics. If I want to choose the exact questions I want my students to see, I can do that here, or I can just let Study Island pick. I'm going to choose the topic, this like the topic and standard, and Study Island, I'll just let them pick the questions randomly. I can also choose whether to allow the questions to be shown on students' devices. For instance, if you use like a Kahoot, then students only can see the answer choices on their devices. With Study Island, you can allow them to see the question and the answer choices, which is great because you're going to have students in the back of the room who maybe can't see the screen. So that way that won't be a hindrance for them. And then there's a timer for answering questions. You can turn that off or on. I'm going to leave it on, but I'm going to move it up for 60 seconds since I'm demoing when I have enough time. And then there's a nickname generator. You'll get to see that leaderboard, and I can choose to have only multiple choice questions for my group session, or I can enable having technology enhanced items if those come up. We'll just leave it as multiple choice for this demo. All right, so now I choose topics. Now, just one thing to point out, this is my test account that I use, so I have a lot of different states in here. You're just gonna have your state, so it won't look like this. It'll be a lot simpler. Select my topic, select my subject, and now I select what I want to do. Oh, I think I wanted to have, there we go. Sorry, I didn't want to select my questions. I was wondering where that was coming from. I was going through the process of selecting questions. I want to change that. So I went back and switched it to where Study Island selects my questions. So I want a short assignment. So I'm just going to do 3 questions. And now I choose my state. Remember, you'll just have one. It won't be this hard. And then I'm going to do math. So now when I'm selecting just my topic and Study Island selecting the questions, I can choose more than one topic. So let's say I do a 5-question session and I choose 2 different topics. Then it'll alternate between those questions. So I'm just doing 3 questions, but you know what? I'm going to choose area and perimeter. Since students sometimes confuse those and what to do with each one, then you can give them a group session asking them questions on each. And that way you can see, you'll easily be able to see if they're kind of confusing those formulas. And then I choose the class I want to assign it to. I already chose my ELA class, but if I have 5 classes, then I can assign it to all of them at once. Makes my life a lot easier. All right, so I'm going to start the session, but just another benefit I want to throw out there. Group sessions, you launch them in the moment, but you can create them ahead of time and then just go in and launch them when you're ready. So I'm going to start my session. And so this is the teacher screen, and the teacher can have this open or close this. And a lot of times the educator will project this part, project their screen for the students, and then the students can see on their own screen. So I'm going to log in as a student here and log in as 2 students. All right, so it's my student dashboard. This is what the student view looks like. You can see blue ribbons earned, different topics I have, assignments, other things happening here. But right now we're going to head into my classes. Once again, my student has a lot of states because they're in my account. Your students will just have theirs. So students can have multiple classes in Study Island, and that's because that's how school works a lot of times. One, if I'm self-contained, I might want to have a separate class for ELA, math, social studies, science, or students might have multiple teachers. And so they'll have different classes for their different teachers, and that's not an issue. So I'm going to view my assignments, challenge test, that's the session that the teacher just launched. So I can launch that here. And Study Island has this really fun nickname generator. And so students can generate a nickname, a superhero name, or a food name. I'm going to be Crazy Pizza. Nah, Space French Fry. So I can save that. And this is kind of fun one because the students get to have a fun nickname. And also, if you don't want students to see exactly who each student is on the leaderboard, then this gives them some anonymity. And so then I go into my other student. I'm going to join. I just think it looks a little better with 2 students. We're going to do a superhero name. Impossible Warrior. Sounds good. So this is a student view. This is my other student view. And so they have to kind of wait for the teacher. And so now I can see my students are here. If I didn't mind sharing this information, if I'm projecting this, then I can also see of my students who has logged in and who's who. So I'm going to start the session. All right, so simple enough, right? We have a question. The students have to figure out the area of this rectangle. But right now, I haven't launched it so my students can respond because this is a teacher-led session. So my students, they can't see the question or anything on their screen yet, but if I'm projecting, then they see this on the board. So I might want to start this off, remind my students, you know, maybe I want to tell them the formula, or maybe I just want to launch it and let them go. But once I click go, they can respond. And there are the answer choices. So here, all right, so now as my students work through it, they're trying to answer as quickly as possible. They have their timer down here. So answer, submit, gonna answer, submit. And so you can see I got this incorrect. So I didn't earn any points. I'm in second place. Got it correct, I earned points. I'm in first place. And then on the teacher screen, the teacher can actually see an answer breakdown. And so they can share that. If the teacher wants to keep the game going, they can just keep moving. Or they can wait, they can go back and review the question with the students to make sure everyone understands it and the formula, and then do the answer breakdown. Now notice here also the answers, there are some opportunities for those close answers, like instead of doing 6 times 3, they have an answer choice of 3 plus 6. So the teacher is going to be able to see if they got this wrong because they did perimeter instead of area. So go to the leaderboard and kind of see. So this will be shared for the students to see. You go on to the next question. So simple enough. I'm going to finish this out just so that you guys can see the results. So we have perimeter here, 26 plus 16. I feel like that's 42. Hopefully I don't embarrass myself here. So this is my student view. Notice I'm just going between tabs. Hopefully I'm not moving too fast for you guys. And I'm gonna let this student get this one right too. All right, so got it correct. Got an answer streak. So this is what your students will see. And then here I can go to the answer breakdown and then to the leaderboard. So that's how this challenge mode group session goes. So your students are kind of waiting to see how they perform, and then they'll be able to see where they are on the leaderboard, hopefully competing to improve and win. And so the teacher controls the pace. So here's the next question. And so for a question like this, if I think it would take them a little while, I might allow my students, I might sit this here and let them think about it a bit before I launch the session. So the area, see we have 36 and 18. Okay, I hope I did that right, y'all. This is third grade math. So 36 and 18, that's gotta end in a 4, I think. But let's let this guy get it wrong. And I hope that's right. Okay. And so now we can see the answer breakdown. I can review the question if I want, but we're going to move forward to the podium. And so this shows at the end, you see the podium, you see who wins, the total score, and you can even print trophies for your students if you want with their names on them. It shows how they performed, hang those up in the classroom. So it's designed to be fun, but they're still getting that test preparation and practice. That's going to help them get ready for that state assessment. But use this with your kids, they'll be asking to do it because they'll love it. So let me end this session here. And so the next thing I want to show you before we kind of discuss how we can use this, or I get your input on how you'd use these, I want to show you what the results look like. So we just saw the results there. As a teacher, I have an overview. I kind of saw how my students were performing. But then later on, once my students are working on something else or after class, I might want to come in here and take a look at that data. Or even if I'm trying to decide if this was a pretest, I'm trying to decide what my students need to do, I can come in here. This was that group session, and I can look at the results really quick. So I can see my 2 students. I can see the questions or how they did on each topic, because remember I had area and perimeter. I can see how many questions were on each topic, their total percentage correct, their questions correct and incorrect. And all of these numbers are clickable, so they'll dive into more information, even the time they spent answering the questions. I can also, especially if I have a whole class, this is extremely helpful, the item analysis, where I'll be able to see the exact questions and how many students got each question correct and incorrect, the standards, the topic, all of that, and even diving into the individual question, what it was, what the correct answer was, and then who got it right and wrong, and even what answer they chose. So you have that live session where your students are getting that practice, they're having fun, and then you can come in here and you get to see that valuable data. Because of course your students are prepping and getting practice for the test, but you also need to see, okay, did they actually get this? Or do I need to do some extra instruction with them to make sure that they get it? And then you can try it again. So that's kind of the overview of group sessions. I wish I had time to show you all 3 of them, but I definitely recommend that you go in and kind of take a look at those. Close out my student views. All right, so I'm gonna launch a poll really quick, and I would love to know, just based on what you've seen here of group sessions, in what ways you plan or how you can envision using this particular feature in your classroom to kind of integrate some test preparation, and of course, formative assessment as well. So I'm gonna launch that poll, and you can choose more than one response.
Hey,
But how do
Regina,
you,
sorry, I just wanted to jump in real quick. While
Mhm.
we're waiting for people to answer this question, I had a question from Jessica about the leaderboard.
Mhm.
In those group sessions, will students be able to see those on their computers also, or is the breakdown and leaderboard only available on the administrator account?
The leaderboard is available on the teacher side. So
Awesome.
yeah, the students will see like at the end, I think I already closed it,
What
but they
place
get
they
like their
received?
little, they'll get their trophy on their screen and it shows like the confetti if they scored in like the top few, but the whole leaderboard is on the teacher view. So for the
Awesome.
students to see the entire thing, they would have to project it.
Perfect. Thanks, Regina.
Mhm. All right, and it looks like almost everyone has voted on our on the poll. I'll give a few more seconds. All right, I'm gonna close that out and share those results. And so it looks like most of you definitely see using this as practice, some as a quiz. I think it would make actually a really nice fun quiz for students. Pre-assessment works really well for that, especially if you want to just before you teach a lesson, do a quick little pre-assessment on using a group session. Exit tickets definitely, and bell ringer warm up. And I remember reading on social that race mode, educators really love that one as a warm up because what they can do, especially like if students have to be at their desks working at a certain time, maybe you give them 2 minutes from when they come in, but launch the session at like 2 minutes after the bell. And then if they're not there seated and started, then they're just behind. So it kind of motivates students to get in their seats, especially if they want to win, to get in their seats and get started as quickly as possible when class begins. Um, but thank you guys for sharing your responses there. We're going to keep moving. All right, so let me head back and launch my slideshow again. All right, so the next feature in Study Island I want to talk about as we think about building test preparation into what we're doing are the practice sessions. So the practice sessions in Study Island, that's when students are working on Study Island topics independently. So they're working on their own devices at their own pace, doing their best to answer the questions correctly and get that practice. So there actually are a couple of ways that you can have your students work on these. So rather than me just talking to you while you're looking at this screen, how about I show you live in the program? So let me get that pulled up. All right, so I'm here back in Study Island. Now, like I mentioned, those practice sessions, that's kind of those independent topics where students can work in Study Island. Now, you can either assign topics to your students, and the benefit of doing that is that you can give them, make sure they're working on exactly what you want them to work on, and it makes it easier and more discreet when you're differentiating. Like maybe you want to give someone else advanced content, someone else needs something below grade level, or you're giving them different topics based on their specific areas of weakness, and you can do that a lot easier if you're creating assignments. Or you can have your students log in, head to the topic tree, and you just tell them which topic you want them to work on. Either way can work. It just depends on what works best for you. So first I'm going to show you how to create an assignment or what the assignment creation looks like and kind of the benefits of that. I say how to really lightly because I'm going to go through it really quickly, but just know that as you're getting in and you're digging around, we have a help center here that has a ton of resources that are going to help you do all of this stuff. So I don't want to focus too much on the how to of this, but just know that those resources are available. So we actually have this new content search area, which is an even more simplified way to create assignments. It's just launched this summer. And so if I want to assign content to my students, I just select my state, select the grade level, and I'm choose the subject. Math has been my subject of the day, so we'll go with that. And so now I can see all the topics here. And so I can look through and decide what I want, or I can come up here and I can filter by topic or standard. So if I know exactly what standard, then that might be easier for me. Or I can choose the topic. So I'm going to choose area. And I also want to show you really quick, we also have this expectation map, and this shows your standards mapped to the study island topics. So if you know you're doing 3.2a, or you know your students need to review that and you're not sure what topic it is, then this will show you. A lot of times you're able to make the connections just because we have the topic names are pretty straightforward, but there can be difficult ones. So we have this available for you too. So here I've selected area, and now I have a lesson, flashcards, practice available to assign to my students. Now, cool thing about this view is as you're creating the assignment, you can launch any of these and just take a look at them. So for instance, the lesson. There's a lesson in Study Island for every single topic. Some of them have videos built in like this one. Some of them it's text and images and practice questions. It really just depends. But the lessons are really great for students to review that concept, or even if it's a new concept, maybe they go in and review it before you instruct them. They're not detailed enough to be considered quote unquote like direct instruction. They definitely can't replace what you can do, but they are a really great review, especially if students are working at home or independently. So for instance, this one has one of our tacos video lessons. And so it actually has a short video that introduces the topic with captions. And then on the next page, there is an application video where it actually applies that topic to a question. And so I want to make sure my student does this. So I can select to assign this. And then there are also flashcards where it's just practice questions that aren't graded. Students can practice and then flip over and see the answer. And then this is the actual topic. So I'm going to select these and assign. And so while I'm in here, I can choose whether or not to enforce the order. What that means is that the lesson and the flashcards, if I don't check this box, then they'll be available to my students, but they don't necessarily have to open them or use them before they go in and do the graded part. Now, I want my students to review that lesson and those flashcards, so I'm going to enforce the order. So maybe they do flashcards, then lesson. It's up to me, but I want them to do it in this order. And then I also have some other options here. Can include constructed response. So those are graded by the educator. All of the other types are graded, system graded. So I'm going to leave those out, and I can choose the number of questions I want them to have to answer, the passing percentage, and also any other, and I can see what resources I'm doing. So I want to say, I'm just going to make this, I don't know, 3 questions. 5 questions, just joking. All right, and then I title it sign date, due date. I can enforce my dates or leave it kind of open-ended, calculator, and even give them a little note. And then I choose which class or classes. Of course, if I have multiple classes, I can assign it to all of them at one time. I can also come in here if I only want, maybe there's one student I want to give something different to. Then I can also uncheck students and just assign it to a few of them. So you have a lot of flexibility there. All right, so my assignment's created. And I can see it here in the class manager of any of the classes I assigned it to. So just like that group session that we did, I can also see my assignment. And just like with group session, as my students complete that assignment, I'm able to see data on how they're working on. And since I'm assigning Study Island practice, if they've completed these topics in practice before, then I can see those results as well. So as a student, just so you can see what that looks like as a student, if I have an assignment, that I come to my classes and I can see that assignment right here and begin working on it. So when a student starts it, because I enforce that, then they have to start with that lesson. And then after that, they can move to flashcards and then the practice, but they can't do it till they've done here. Now I mentioned there was another way that students can access topics. If I'm not creating assignments for them, I can allow my students to access topics from their topic tree. So as a student, this will default to what grade level I'm in and the subject I worked on last, but the student can simply come in here and choose a topic to work on. And so I could tell them, hey, everyone, go to your topic tree, select money, and I could do that as well. I won't have the data neatly in my assignments and class manager, but in reporting, you'll be able to see exactly how your students performed, and you'll have the same data visibility. It just depends on how you want to run it. And so another cool thing with Study Island, even when students are working independently, we have those games and they're available. So independent practice, of course, lends itself to test preparation because they're focusing, they're not timed like on a group session and they're kind of working at their same pace. So you definitely want to integrate a lot of this, but also know that like this works well. So you can use this as like a quiz or at the beginning of class to get them started. There are lots of different ways you can use this practice. Now, I recommend game mode because students only get to play the game once they have completed the activity. I mean, once they've gotten a question correct. So it kind of motivates them to do their best and get those questions right. So I just want to show you guys one of these. So I did money, 44 cents. So if I get this right, then I get that immediate feedback. There's also an explanation for every single question. So when your students are working independently, they see that explanation, they can review to make sure they understand it. And then because I got it right, I get to play the game. All right, so I think what I'm supposed to do is put as many words as I can. I don't think I've ever played this game. Yeah, and so this game, the students make as many words as they can. Reminds me of a game that I play on my phone quite a bit. So I'm going to exit out, but the students get a certain amount of time to play. Like I think it was 90 seconds before they have to go on to the next question. All right, so now if I get a question wrong, then the explanation automatically pops up for me and I don't get to play the game. So that's kind of how the independent practice works in game mode. In practice mode, it works the same, except that there's no game option at all for them to play. But the data is saved the exact same way, and your students work through it kind of at their own pace, but it's still tracking their stats, their time, all of that for you. So I'm going to save this session. All right, so I kind of showed you what the data would look like before, and looking at time, I don't want to go back into that, so I'm just going to finish that. So that's how practice session works. So thinking about how you can have your students work on a particular topic, you can create an assignment for them or just tell them what you want them to work on. This is worked on independently, and Study Island tracks all their data and their results, and they're getting that practice to get ready for the test. How do you envision using practice sessions? How could you envision using those in your classroom? I'm going to share that poll right now. And as I'm getting ready to share that, if you have any, are there any questions, Haley?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions on where we can go to find these. So one question was where do students find their topic tree? And then we also had a question on where on the admin side you go to set up the practice session. So
Okay,
if you could just real quick show those again while people are filling out their poll. Well, I suppose. Uh,
I'll have to do it after.
yeah.
But yeah.
Mhm.
All right, I'll wait a couple seconds. People are voting. All right, let me close that. All right, so some varied responses. So most of you see this as like a practice activity. Definitely, like right after instruction, have your students go in, apply what they've learned, and it makes a great bridge between the more concrete way that we teach things and then the more abstract way that students are called on to show their understanding on state assessments. Study Island is great for that bridge. So using it for like that practice right after instruction is really nice, or for practice when you're reviewing things that you've taught last semester. Quizzes, yeah, Study on topics make great quizzes and homework as well, and definitely for pre-test too. And bell ringers, yeah, having them work independently on that bell ringer, especially if it was like, 4 or 5 questions, so it's a little shorter, can work nicely for that too. All right, so to address the question, for students to access their topic tree, so if you just said, hey, go work on your third grade, go to third grade math and work on place value, then I'm in a student account right now. So when they log in, they just select the state, their state will be here. They won't have 10 states, they'll just have one. And they just select the state. It's gonna default to their grade level, whatever grade they're enrolled in Study Island. And the subject they can select it, it'll default to where they were last, and then they just click on the topic and get started. And for an educator, so this is automatically set up. So as soon as you enroll your students in Study Island, they can do this. So you don't have to do anything on your side for them to be able to get in here and work. Now, if you want to create an assignment for them, then that's where you go into where I showed you guys before. You can head like to assign a practice topic, you head into this content search area. But if you don't want to create an assignment for them, you haven't created your classes yet, but you want your students to get started, as soon as they have an account, they can log in and go to their topic trees. And then you can get everything set up on the back end. You know, like as far as creating classes, if you want to create assignments, you can do that later, but you don't have to wait to do that to get them working. Okay, did that answer the questions, Haley?
Yes, I believe so.
All right, so we're gonna get to the last bit of our session here. I always end up running right up on time. Let me pull up my slide really quick.
Regina, while you do that, I'm going to upload the attendance certificate because we have about 10 minutes left, and I know that some people might have to jump off right at time. So
Mm-hmm.
just so everybody knows, I'm about to upload the attendance certificate in the handout section of your control panel. So
Awesome.
go ahead.
All right, so here, the last thing I wanted to show you guys was Test Builder. Now, Test Builder allows you to build custom assessments with the exact standards and questions you want to include. So this will give your students, it's nice because it gives them a more formalized testing experience than practice. And anytime you want to do a unit test or a pre-test or like a mini benchmark, anything like that, you can do using Test Builder, even weekly quizzes. It's just a little bit more formal of an experience. So let me show you really quickly what that looks like. I'm going to show you an intro to creating one. I'm not going to go through the process just because of time, but I'll just show you where it is and how you can start that process. And then I'll show you what one looks like completed and the data. So we'll just head to my teacher page. And actually, I'll just go to class manager. There are a couple different ways. We have kind of the program all linked up so you can get to your different areas. But if I go to my class manager here, I can create an assignment from here or from my teacher page. So I'm just going to do it from here. And now I'm going to use Test Builder. Now it's called Test Builder because you're building a custom test, but you're pulling those questions from our item bank. You're not required to write the questions and put them in there. But you actually, Study Island does give you that capability. You can create questions through custom material and then pull some of your own questions into a built test as well. That's definitely a possibility. And so you'd come in here and select your questions. You just have your state. Once again, I know I've said that like 100 times, but it looks crazy complicated because I have so many states in my account. And so here I just choose my topics and the number of and the questions I want from each topic. So for instance, if I wanted to come down, since area has been my topic of the day, I can select area. And then I can take a look at the questions available. So for instance, if I want to make sure, maybe I don't want constructed response, but I want to see questions from different item types, then I can leave all those checked. If I want questions from a certain depth of knowledge, I can look and see what's available. You just expand and take a look at the questions. Okay, I like this one. I'm going to add that to my test. Add that to my test. And it's as simple as that. So once I'm ready, I can save that and then I can go in and select another topic if I want questions for multiple topics. So that's kind of the process you go through to create the test. You just select your questions. You can put all topics on one test if you want. You can put 5 topics. You can mix math and ELA. It's completely up to you. But either way, they're going to be system graded, and then the results are available to you automatically. So I'm going to exit out of this one and just show you what one looks like completely done. So we're going to do this, cooking show style. So I'm going to head back to my class manager. Now here in my class, I have one that I've made before. So once these tests are completed, you can actually share them across your grade level, across your school. So if you want to make a 5th grade 9 weeks test or a 5th grade, unit test, then you can use that in Study Island and share it with the other 5th grade teachers to assign to their students too. So here I have a test that I created. Just want to show you guys what it looks like. So from the student side, it would look like this. So it's a more formal testing experience. The player is built to be similar to those they see on those state tests. You can also add in tools like you can enable a text-to-speech function, highlighters, things like that. And it's more like an assessment in that they can toggle between questions. Like I can move between and answer the questions in any order I want. I can go back and check my work before turning it in. And then when I'm done, I can turn in my test. And so once the students have turned in their assessments, then you can actually view the results right here. And the data is broken down by the topics. So if you chose from 10 different topics, then you'll have those across the top. So you can see exactly how students performed on each topic. It's all graded and profiled for you. It's one of my favorite parts because you don't have to write the questions and you don't have to grade it, and it's all there and ready for you. So you can see how they performed, you can know which topics you need to review, what they need to work on, and then all the while they were getting that really nice assessment practice that they're gonna need to be ready for that test. So you kind of both are getting what you need there. And there's an item analysis just like in the group session as well. So in a nutshell, that's Test Builder. And I was gonna do a poll and learn a little bit more about how you guys see yourselves using this one, but it's 12:26, so I'm not gonna do that just because we're out of time. But that was the last feature I wanted to show you today. And so I hope that you've kind of gotten, just by understanding what those features are and how you can use them within your current instructional strategies to build in some state test preparation into what you're already doing. So now I'm going to hand it over to Haley to just kind of review any other questions we have. She's going to tell you guys a little bit about the survey. But before I do that, I want to make sure that y'all know about the questions contest, since all of you mentioned that you are current Study Island users. The contest, actually registration is open now. It runs from February 9th through March 28th. And essentially we have 3 school winners. You win a $250 pizza party and $250 for school supplies, one for elementary, middle, and high. And it's by the average number of students questions answered correctly per student for the school winners. And then for the student winners, actually 6 of those, first and second place for each grade span, and they get a $100 or $50 Target gift card. And then we also have a social media challenge that starts now. And for the social media challenge, it kind of runs alongside this questions contest, but it's kind of its own thing. You just go to Facebook or Twitter and take a picture or a short video of you and or your students. I know for student privacy, you may not be able to show pictures of them, but using Study Island, so it could just be you, and give a sentence or two about how you're using the program, and use hashtag Study Island 2020, and make sure at Facebook you tag @Edmentum, or on Twitter you tweet it @Edmentum. If you do both of those things, then you'll be entered to win a $100 Amazon or Target gift card. You get to pick. And we're choosing one winner from Twitter and one winner from Facebook, so you can enter on both for 2 chances. So those things are starting actually right now. I'm going to chat out the link to the landing page for that. And I just have my screen pulled up to Study Island. And while I do that, Haley, you want to go ahead and talk about the questions?
Yeah, for the survey.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Let's see here. Let's see if we've got any questions. So everyone, if you have any questions, we'll stay on the line. I know that it's 12:30, but we can stay on a little bit longer if you guys can to answer any of your lingering questions that you have. I did find one question that was, can you type in a nickname for the checkpoint activity? Like, can your students use a nickname for checkpoint activities?
No, there aren't nicknames for Checkpoint.
Okay,
But it doesn't, the teacher view for Checkpoint also doesn't reveal the students' names unless you choose to. So you can hide their names though, so that it doesn't like show who's getting what questions right. The teacher can see that herself.
awesome. And so for the game group sessions, are the group sessions only available in live mode, or can students do it at home on their own?
Well, group session is meant to be done like live. So if you want your students to like, I mean, technically, you don't have to be in the same room. Like, let's say you wanted to do, a 4 p.m. quiz and you launch it at at 4 and your students log on and do it, you could do that, but you would have to launch it. And it would go, like once you launch it, then it would go for your students. So they can do it at home, but it's meant to be live. If they're going to work independently, then you would just have them work in a practice session.
Awesome. Next question that I did have about the spring questions contest, is it available in Spanish? Or can we get that information to Lindsay?
Like the questions contest information in Spanish? Was
Um,
that the question, Haley?
yeah, it says, oh, the info for parents.
Ah, I do not have that parent letter in Spanish, but I could probably make one. Um, with help from my wonderful, I could start it and get help from my teammate Babby to make sure that my Spanish isn't too bad.
Of course.
But we could create that. Like it probably take me a few days.
Hmm.
But whoever asked that question, if they're entering and they need the parent letter in Spanish, have them like make sure we have their email address.
Yep. Well, yep. So Lindsay will reach out to you soon. Okay. And then
Wait,
I have
Lindsay?
one, Lindsay
Oh,
Campbell.
Lindsay's the person who
That's
asked.
the
Okay.
asker. Yeah.
I
Hmm.
was like, Lindsay's gonna reach out to her? We
No,
have a
no, no.
person on our team
Yeah.
named Lindsay.
Yeah. So then I have one more question. So once you launch something, how long does it stay active for the students to access? I'm assuming that means the like group sessions or the practice sessions.
Like a group session, you can create a group session like as a teacher. You can create them up to 6 months in advance, I believe, like and just have them sitting, and then you launch them when they're ready to go. A group session, you wouldn't launch it until you're ready to use it. An assignment you can create, and it's gonna stay. You can create those and have them deactivated. Like you can create like assignments ahead of time, and those will sit there for like years. Um, and then you make it active for your students. So I hope that answered the question. As far as launching it, like if your student launches a topic and then walks away, I think after a while it'll go idle and time them out. I don't know the exact time for that off the top of my head.
Awesome. Let's see here. I had a couple of people ask if they can review this webinar, so I just want to let everybody who's still on the line know that this session is being recorded and you will receive an email later today with a link to the recording as well as that certificate of attendance that I added to the handouts for you all. And then it looks like I have one more question for you, Regina, and it was,
Mhm.
can we copy things that are created for another class session? So if you've created something for one class, can you then copy it later and um, assign it to another class? Tara, is that correct? She might be typing in.
Okay.
Yes,
Well, I'll go
that
ahead
is
and
that is the question. Yep.
okay. So for Test Builder, like if you build an assessment where you go in and select your questions, those are saved. You can save those to the Built Test library, and then those exist for you and other teachers to use as many times as you want. For like practice assignments or group sessions, once you've created them and assigned them to a class, I'm trying to think. I don't think you can copy them over to another class, but you can assign them to multiple classes at once. So like if you have 5 classes, then when you're assigning it, you can go in and assign it to your classes. I'm just trying to think through if there's a way that I can, once I've created it and assigned it to a class, kind of go back and edit and add more classes. I know I can probably add more students. Let me see real quick. So I don't think you can. Okay, so you can't copy it necessarily, but it kind of does the same thing. So let's say I created it like I did during the session. I created that assignment and I assigned it to this ELA class, right? So if I want to go back and then assign it to my other class that I didn't assign it to, then I can do that. So I guess it kind of serves that same purpose. But I can't go in and assign it to more students or more classes.
Awesome. And then to be clear, that doesn't mix the data. The data for each class is separate, right?
Yeah, yeah. And like data in Study Island is actually tied to the student. So you can think of classes as more like groupings of students. So all of a student's data is tied to them. So if I move a student from class to class, their data essentially goes with them. It won't necessarily, maybe it won't be tied to that particular assignment anymore, but the data is always going to be with the student. So even if I delete this assignment, the data that the student accumulated in Study Island, if I go to their other reports, then I'm going to see that data there. So no, assigning it to multiple classes, if I go to class manager for this class, I just see this class's data. To see it for the other class, I just go to the other class's class manager and I see their data. So it doesn't mix it in the way that she's saying. No.
Awesome. All right, perfect. And then one final question is, does Study Island work well on Kindles? Do you know that, Regina?
I don't know. I think that I feel like it should. I know you can log in on a Kindle. The games, I wonder, like it just depends on the screen size, but we can get those specs. I think they're on like edmentum.com and also like contact the support team if you have any trouble. But I definitely, well, how about this? I know that you can log in and use Study Island on a Kindle. I just don't know if like everything works perfectly because it works on a phone too,
Okay.
but it just lends itself to a larger screen. That's where my
Hmm.
worry is, or a Kindle Fire at least, because I
Awesome.
have one of those in my house and I've seen my son use Study Island on it.
Very cool. Okay. Awesome. Well, it doesn't look like I have any more questions. Um, so
Awesome. Well, I
yeah,
hope everybody signs up for the contest. Click on that link and also go ahead and enter the social media challenge too. Um, yeah, we'd love to see those responses and just get your school signed up so that you're ready to go.
okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Regina, for taking time to share your expertise. This was super great and super informative. And then thank you all for joining us. We really hope that we will see you on a future webinar. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, Haley.